Okay, son, bear with me. When our people come of age, we leave Viltrum and venture out into the galaxy, using our abilities to help lesser developed worlds. I volunteered to relocate to Earth and be its sole protector. That's when I met your mother. And we eventually had you. You're half Viltrumite, son.
Yeah.
And you're getting older.
Yeah, I saw.
Things are going to start to change for you in a few years as you hit
I'll be
puberty.
out in a minute.
I don't have a minute.
Mom.
My bathroom's out of soap. Get over yourself.
And you're going to start to develop superpowers of your own. Just like me. Super strength and speed, flight, the whole bit. Do you understand?
I'm gonna be able to fly?
It's about time.
Yes, son.
Guess who's finally getting his powers?
You're going to be able to fly. That's great, son, just great. I don't think you're ready.
I'm strong.
I know you are.
No, you don't! I'm strong enough! And I can do this. It's all I ever wanted for as long as I can remember. I want to do what you do. I want to be just like you.
You will be, son. You will.
Get in there. Come on, guys!
Mark, we need to talk. Wait, before you say anything, I'm not a monster. I didn't want to do it. What I'm about to tell you will change everything. We need to get Earth ready to join the Viltrum Empire. Mark, this is good news.
You lied to me. No, this doesn't make any sense. You love me. You love Mom. I know you do.
Should be overjoyed to see your parents passionately expressing their love for each other.
So be it.
Hit me. It scared me. It wasn't too much. I could take the pain. Please, just hit me. I'm strong enough. And I can do this.
Don't try to talk. You're gonna be okay. You're safe now. It's all over. Things are gonna be different now, aren't they?
It's too much. I can't do it.
Remember when you were little and we'd talk almost every night before you went to bed? You'd tell me about whatever jerk made fun of your hair, and I'd tell you about all the girl drama I lived through so you'd feel better. I can't talk to you while we soar through the clouds, but I'm still here.
After everything he's done, how can I possibly live up to all that?
Who says you have to? You don't have to be the greatest Omni-Man ever. You just have to be the greatest you.
In a world without heroes with super abilities, we tend to cling to the ones that are presented to us on screen. I think everybody has a different reason why they admire superheroes. As kids, we admire the otherworldly ability they seem to possess, and dream of what we would do with similar abilities. I think we admire the responsibility and the mental fortitude superheroes represent, but I believe no character better represents the superhero's journey than Mark Grayson, otherwise known as... How is it going, Mudbeards? I'm very excited to bring my first ever Invincible video on the channel. I want to preface that I have not read the comics. The most I have involved myself within them is just watching YouTube channels break down the episodes as they would release. I also happened to see two panels from the comics. I'm not sure if they were from the very ending of the series or from some alternate dimension. Nothing too spoilery either way. But what I'm hoping to do with this video is mainly break down why Mark Grayson perfectly captures the superhero story, and why Invincible as a whole is definitely worth watching if you haven't watched it already. The first section of this video will be minor spoilers, and then as it progresses, I'll just keep going. I do want to request that comic readers keep spoilers out of the comments, just because I really do want to go into the series with a blind eye. For that exact reason, I won't be doing theory videos on this series, but I do plan on doing reactions and eventually character breakdowns of every single character I can think of that has a somewhat interesting story going on that maybe isn't fully presented front and center on screen. But if you stick with me, you might find a newfound appreciation for the series if you didn't already find one already. From shows like Game of Thrones to The Walking Dead, reutilizing narrative tension and really keep people coming back. Speaking of The Walking Dead, I've been a long-time fan of that series as a whole. My brother had gotten me into the series when the first season was presented. Now this show didn't really have any superheroes, but it did have several characters with a single, similar power, and that power was plot armor. I can't tell you how many times these characters should have bit the dust, but that's besides the point. I really enjoyed coming back and seeing what character decisions would lead to what consequences. And while the TV series eventually became a little lackluster, the comic series was a solid narrative through and through. And throughout the years that I would keep up with both the comics and the TV series, another one of Robert Kirkman, the author of The Walking Dead's works, would also keep reappearing in my peripheral. It was a comic series he called... Now, I'm going to be a little real with you. Every time I had seen any images or panels from this comic, I didn't really look too much into it. As far as I could see, it seemed like his attempt at maybe creating his own superhero story, maybe before tapping into a more adult story like The Walking Dead. And don't get me wrong, I've always been a big fan of superheroes, but one reason I prefer the Marvel Cinematic Universe over the comics is because it's just too oversaturated. There's so many characters with so many powers that it makes you question how problems could even present themselves in the first place. Let alone the fact that most characters just keep coming back over and over and over again. And I was already juggling researching that just to keep up with all the Marvel films and shows that were coming out. The idea of including an entirely other superhero universe into my watch orbit was just not something I was that interested in. And even though, from everyone that had read it, there was only good things to say, I felt supporting the Walking Dead comics and the show was enough of my involvement with Robert Kirkman's work at the time. Yeah, I was a fucking idiot. Now eventually they announced they were going to release an animated series on Amazon. And when I heard about some of the cast they had included, I was pretty intrigued, but I also had a lot of other shows that I was watching that left this show least to be desired. But as that episode had released, some of the reaction channels that I had watched, even ones that unironically covered The Walking Dead, had covered this show and had thumbnails and reactions that genuinely left me wondering what this show could really have going on. So I decided to just give the first episode a watch. And for the first 30 to 40 minutes, I genuinely found it no different than any other DC animated film or Marvel animated show. It just seemed like this series about a happy-go-lucky kid who is slowly excited to get superpowers and is maybe learning to stop a new bad guy to stop each and every week. And those just aren't necessarily narratives that I'm very fond of. And as the episode came to a close, I figured the fandom that was reacting so heavily to this series was maybe just a fandom I wasn't necessarily going to be a part of. That was until the mid-credit scene actually came out. See, the mid-credit scene ended up revealing one of the biggest twists I've ever seen with one of the most pivotal characters within the series. And this twist added a ripple effect for the rest of the show as a whole. As soon as the episode had actually concluded, that mid-credit scene alone had convinced me to stick with the series all the way through. I don't know why, but I couldn't even fathom the idea that Robert Kirkman would incorporate his sadistic, gory imagery that he would possess in The Walking Dead, and also incorporate it into Invincible, which I think came out before The Walking Dead. And the rest of the season kept playing off of this twist and building the narrative and world in such a seamless way that it culminated in a season finale that I would say is only topped by Severance in regards to narrative, climax, impactfulness. That's even a phrase. The series continued to do very well with audiences, and it turns out the comic series that I had been ignoring had already concluded. So, the full narrative of the show was already done, and the ending was already in the author's mind. let alone the fact that they could plant the seeds of the narrative arcs they wanted throughout the story in a very seamless way. This had convinced me that the show's pacing was going to be top-notch. Everybody knows the next draft is always better than the last. If you for some reason haven't watched it, I highly recommend giving it a shot, but otherwise, I'm going to start stepping into more spoiler territory. This show incorporates elements from other comics, series, and films in a way that perfectly subverts expectations. Examples of this include Mark getting his powers and immediately getting humbled over and over and over again, and villain groups that are seemingly seen as a joke, literally the Lizard League was even beaten off screen, tend to come back and have a huge impact in the narrative that you just don't see coming. See, all of the characters act how you would see any other superhero character would in most of these animated projects. The only difference is, after each severe fight, they have a lasting impact. That does seem to change them as a whole. And while I will go over how a lot of these characters evolve throughout the series and a lot of my character breakdowns coming out, today I just kind of want to focus on Mark and just the main idea of the superhero aspect as a whole. Mark is a character that is, like I said, constantly being humbled. But he slowly overcomes whatever humbled him and earns a bit of confidence back in a very authentic way, which makes it so any ego he builds up doesn't seem like it's really out of nowhere. But it also makes it so that any ego he does build up gets broken down again in a very similar way at the last. What helps you cling to his journey is not only the fact that he wants to be a hero like most other kids want to be, but the fact that he needs to make up for some of the damage his dad and his entire race has caused as a whole. See, his dad was revealed to be part of this large intergalactic empire that was slowly taking over the entire universe. And while I'm convinced if Omni-Man had told his son this from the beginning and raised him with that same brainwashed mindset, it would have been a whole different story. The fact that Mark was raised having such admiration for what his dad seemingly did to help people, and his supposed compassion for humans altogether, seeing those ideals crushed and his role model turn into something that is a complete opposite of where he was on the mental spectrum, really makes you feel for how Mark will find himself. See, within a lot of origin stories for superheroes, the characters are directly responsible for whatever tragic events propels their story forward. Bruce got his parents killed, Peter Parker got his uncle killed. But in Invincible, while he does get himself into a lot of his own situations, he really doesn't deserve most of what happens to him throughout the series. He's very much a normal person to watch, let alone could easily be an audience surrogate. At the beginning of the story, he's just a normal guy trying to balance life and becoming a superhero as a whole. And throughout the story, you see how that trauma sits heavy with him. His wants to be a superhero and be better comes from not only needing to protect everybody he cares about, but to make sure he doesn't become the things he hates. And yes, these story elements can be found in many superhero stories. Like I said, they're very oversaturated. This series is based off of one comic that only had one narrative arc all the way through. And while there might be tweaks to the narrative within this show, we're not getting different branches of stories altogether. And while Mark might come off as a noble, stoic, honorable, can't do any wrong type of guy, we see that he can easily succumb to the same human faults that anybody else would. Whether it be a lack of responsibility, greed, selfishness, anger, or trauma, he is someone that, while physically much more extraordinary than most of the average human, his mental is still very human at the end of the day. And to keep that in mind while watching everything he endures and to see that he keeps coming back is insane. I know it would just take one of those situations to put any of us, superpowers or not, into the villain category. And that's not even to say he's not capable of becoming a villain. See, within the series, they play with the idea of multiple dimensions in a way, and while fortunately it's not a serious part of the narrative, it is done in a way to express that Mark, just like anybody else, could easily have succumbed to turning to the dark side. We see versions of him that joined his dad in welcoming the Viltrumites and taking over Earth. We see versions of him that are so angry they enjoy the malicious nature they input on other people around them. This just shows us how much Mark really is fighting to be the best version of a hero he can be. And while I don't really know where his narrative ends up going, there's always twists with these characters, and he just recently got a new costume that I've seen a lot of people make memes about, and it seems like he has some pretty serious stuff going on. Maybe he becomes a much more serious character. It would be interesting if he did become a villain. I just don't see that happening. But to live up to the idea of what a hero is that he had in his head since a child is one of the most endearing aspects of the entire show. Anyways, this was my first ever Invincible video, like I said. I was really excited to make it. I've recorded some reactions for the first few episodes, and if that video I post does well, then I'll be doing reactions for every single episode, every single week. But either way, I do want to do breakdowns of each character. I already got video ideas and scripts for both Cecil and Adam Eve, but I want to continue to do some for each character, especially as the season progresses, because I'm noticing we're seeing a lot of evolution with a lot of characters like Rex. Either way, thank you all for watching. If you enjoyed this video or have any suggestions, feel free to like or leave a comment down below. Very much enjoying stepping into the rest of the season here. And remember, you don't have to be super to be a hero. That was cringe.